I remember a few months ago when I was at my local camera shop, I talked to the staff and chat about what is the most popular camera right now. One thing that I was quite surprised is when they told me that point and shoot cameras are still quite popular. Pretty much every day they will have customers that come to their shop and wanting to buy a point and shoot camera, especially those that are fairly compact but has a high power zoom lens. Unfortunately, most of these compact cameras are no longer available, so they actually don't have cameras to sell to those customers. But the good news is, now one of these classics is back. We have this Panasonic Lumix TZ99, which is a successor to the TZ95 and TZ95D. This new camera is very similar to the TZ95 in good and bad way. Before we start this review, I want to mention that this review is based on a pre-production camera that I borrowed from Panasonic. The camera is also running pre-production firmware. This new TZ99 has a 30x Leica optical zoom lens that covers from a pretty wide 24mm equivalent focal length all the way to 720mm. The maximum aperture is f3.3 at the wide end to f6.4 at the tele end. Just like its predecessor, it is a very affordable camera. The retail price here in New Zealand will be around 850 New Zealand dollar, while in the US it will be $499. So it's at a price point that could be an impulse buy for a lot of people, especially if you are someone that is going to have a holiday trip and you want to have a camera that can zoom in a lot. And the 30x zoom lens on the TZ99 can really zoom in a lot. So here is a photo that I shot at the wide end using this camera, and then I zoom all the way to 720mm. So that is quite a lot of zoom for such a small camera. And this 30x zoom is purely optical. So it is quite different to the camera on the latest smartphones, which the maximum zoom advertised is very often a digital zoom, or they may call it hybrid zoom or optical quality zoom. But what they mean is digital zoom that crops the image and then just upsizing the cropped image. Actually, this TZ99 also has a digital zoom feature as well. So if you enable the iZoom feature, which is just a fancy name for digital zoom, you can get 60x zoom. To keep this camera compact, the camera has quite a small sensor. It's only 1/2.3 inch. It means the image quality might not be so good, especially when you are shooting under low light. And we'll be doing some image quality tests a little bit later on in this review. If you have used a TZ95 or TZ95D, then you will probably find this camera very familiar because this new camera is largely based on those cameras. But it does have a few upgrades and changes. So now let's have a closer look at the camera first. So this is a reasonably compact camera. It's not too large. If you want to fit it into your pocket, you should be able to do it reasonably easy. While the TZ99 is not an expensive camera, but the build quality is still pretty good. It doesn't really feel cheap or very plasticky at all. The overall build quality is pretty good. And the weight of this camera is only 322 grams with the battery and the memory card, so it's also reasonably lightweight. We have the power button here. The camera starts up pretty quickly after you press the button, and the lens would now extend, and then you can use this zoom control to zoom in or out the lens. And then we have the usual mode dial here for you to change to different photo and video mode. And we have this red record button here for starting recording video. And that's pretty much it for all the controls at the top. We also have a stereo mic here. And now if you look at the front, there isn't any button at all at the front. We do have this large dial here for you to change the setting. So this is the main control dial for changing camera setting. It doesn't have the typical control dial that you find on most of the mirrors or DSLR cameras. And we also have a little internal built-in flash here, which could be quite handy because this camera doesn't have a large sensor. So when you are taking photo at night, the internal flash would really help quite a bit. And if we look at the back, we have a 3-inch 1840K dot LCD screen, which I believe is the same panel as the one that we have on the S5 too. So it is a pretty nice panel and it is quite bright as well. So even if you have to shoot on a bright sunny day, it should still work quite well. And this is quite important because this camera doesn't have any EVF unlike the TZ95. With the TZ95 there is a EVF here, but this camera doesn't have it. But you can still tilt the monitor up like this, so it is great if you want to do some selfie or you want to shoot a bit of vlogging style video. And when you flip this monitor up, then the camera will also turn into a different mode, so you have more special options that you can do, like some of the beauty filter for selfie that you can select when you have the screen flip up like this. We don't have too many buttons or dials at the back of the camera. The typical D-pad here and the outside ring is rotatable, so you can use it to change some of the camera setting. For example, when you're shooting in M mode, then you can use the front dial to change one of the setting and then this control dial to change the other exposure setting. Apart from the D-pad, we have a few buttons and some of these are customizable. So if you want to assign it to something else, you can just do a long press and it will bring up the menu for you to assign it to some other functions if you want. And one of the more special button is this button here. This is the composition zoom assistant button. This is very handy when you zoom in quite a bit. And you can use this button to quickly zoom out that help you locate your subject, and then you can let go of the button and then it will zoom back into your original focal length. There isn't any input or output port on the left side of the camera, but on the other side, if you open the door here, then there is a micro HDMI port and also a USB-C port for you to charge the battery. So this is one of the upgrades that comes with this TZ99. At the bottom of the camera, we have the usual tripod mount, which is at the center of the camera, but it is not the same axis if you compare to where the sensor and the lens is. And we have the battery door here, which also contains the space for you to put the SD card. And that's pretty much it. So the overall design is pretty simple, which is probably a good thing because that means the camera is very easy to use. So in terms of body design and hardware, the major difference is that the TZ99 has a 3-inch 1840K dot LCD screen, which is the same as the TZ95D, but it is better than the TZ95, which has a 1040K dot screen. The USB port is upgraded from micro USB to now a USB-C port. If you have been following me on this channel for a while, you will probably know that I just really don't like micro USB port. So it's good to see that there's no more micro USB port on this camera. Internally, the Bluetooth module is upgraded from 4.2 to 5.0. In theory, Bluetooth 5.0 does provide increased range and speed, But I haven't got a TZ95, so I can't really do any testing to see if this Bluetooth 5.0 does give us any real benefit. But I also believe the file transfer function of this camera is done by Wi-Fi, so there may not be any real improvement apart from updating to a newer Bluetooth standard. And these are pretty much all the major hardware changes compared to its predecessor, so not really that much. Now let's have a look at the image quality. For a camera like this TZ99, there are two major components that would affect the image quality. One is the lens and one is the sensor. So let's talk about the lens first. The lens on this TZ99 is a Leica 4.3 to 129mm f3.3 to f6.4 lens. With the 5.6 times crop factor, the full frame equivalent focal length is 24 to 720mm. Here is a set of photos that I shot from the wide end to the telephoto end. I think they all look pretty good and sharp enough to me. The lens has pretty minimal distortion. Chromatic aberration control is also quite well. Lens flare is minor even when I'm shooting directly into the sun. On the negative side, I don't really like the bokeh. Bokeh looks a bit busy to me, and you also can't get any beautiful sun stars. But considering it is a 30 times zoom lens that the camera can fit inside your pocket and the price is very affordable, I think the lens optical performance is really not bad overall. Now, as mentioned before, the camera's sensor size is only 1/2.3 inch, and the small sensor size is the important key to allow the camera to be pocketable. But at the same time, the small sensor would also have impact on the image quality, especially the low light image quality. The camera can shoot photo in RAW format as well as JPEG, but since I do not have any RAW reader for this camera, so all the photos in this review were shot in JPEG format. I also think most people buying this camera will be shooting in JPEG anyway. From ISO 80 to ISO 200, the image quality is pretty decent. At ISO 400, we're starting to see a little bit of drop in image quality. At ISO 800, while the colors and contrasts are still good, fine details starting to disappear because of the noise reduction. But overall, the image still looks okay and is pretty clean. Once we reach ISO 1600, then we can start to see more noise. If you want good image quality, I would suggest you try to keep the ISO to maximum 800 if possible. The maximum ISO 3200, I think it is really for emergency use only. Now, while the lens f3.3 to 6.4 maximum aperture doesn't really help when shooting under low light, but the lens has optical image stabilizer which allows you to shoot at slower than normal shutter speed, and the camera also has a built-in flash. So while I think this camera is really mainly a daytime camera, it is still possible to use this camera at nighttime with the help of the built-in flash and optical image stabilizer. In terms of video, this camera can capture 1080p and 4K video. 1080p video is up to 60 frames per second and 4K video is up to 30 frames per second. There is a 1.45 times crop when you are shooting in 4K resolution, so the wide end is not really that wide anymore. I have tried to shoot a bit of vlogging style video in 4K as the camera's flip up screen make it easy to shoot vlogging style video. However, I found that if I just handhold the camera, the framing is just a little bit too tight when I'm shooting in 4K resolution. But on the positive side, because of the crop, the tele end is 1050mm equivalent focal length, so you have a bit of extra reach. Here are some 4K video clips that I shot at different focal length using the TZ99. 4K video, it has a lot of details, and you also have the flexibility of the 30 times optical zoom, which allows you to capture something that is far away and you need to zoom in a lot. If you don't like the crop and you want to shoot wider angle, then you can shoot in Full HD resolution instead. While the Full HD video is definitely not as sharp or detailed as the 4K video, I think the video quality is still okay, especially if you are just planning to post those videos on social media. Speaking of social media, this camera now supports vertical shooting, which means if you hold the camera vertically, the video that you shot will be displayed vertically automatically when you play back on a computer or other smart devices. Another improvement is that there is now a red record frame border displayed on the screen when you are shooting video, so you can see very easily if you are recording video or not. One more thing that you need to aware is that while the camera has optical image stabilization, the stabilization effect is really average when you are shooting video. So you will quite often see a bit of vibration in your video, especially when you are walking and recording at the same time. This combined with the not really fast sensor readout speed, you will see some jello effect in your video. So if you want to get the best video quality, I would suggest you to shoot with a tripod or a monopod. Even a tiny tripod or monopod can help improve the quality of the video quite significantly. This camera uses Panasonic's DFD autofocus system. When shooting photos in single AF mode, the autofocus speed is pretty fast and also pretty accurate. You can enable face eye detection if you are shooting portrait, but there's no animal or any other AI subject detection. DFD is really not the fastest autofocus system for video continuous tracking, and there could also be issues like pausing. But because of the small sensor used by the TZ99, which give you a pretty deep depth of field, so autofocus is not really that demanding, and as a result, TZ99's video autofocus performance is actually very usable. So overall, while I definitely won't say TZ99's autofocus performance is amazing, but I think it should be good enough for most users. By the way, the camera comes in the new eco-friendly packaging, which is mostly cardboard, and it has very minimal amount of plastic inside, basically just some small plastic bags. The size of this new packaging is also smaller as well, but the camera also doesn't come with a stand-alone charger anymore. I believe this is due to the new EU regulation for devices that can be charged by USB-C port. Over the last few years, pretty much all the compact point-and-shoot camera have disappeared from the market. Sometimes it's because of the camera company's own decisions, but quite often it's because of some components are no longer available when the supplier stopped making them, so the companies are forced to discontinue the camera entirely. So it's really great to see there is a new compact camera like this TZ99 appears in the market again. While this TZ99 is really just a TZ95 or TZ95D with some minor improvements, I myself would like to see some bigger improvements like what we see on some of the latest Lumix mirrorless cameras, but the reality is the compact camera market has pretty much completely died over the last few years, and as a result, all the camera companies really hasn't been spending much R&D money in this area. I mean, why would any company want to invest a lot of money into a market that everyone believes is already dead? Now, on the positive side, Since this TZ99 is more like a minor update, it allows Panasonic to sell this camera at a very low price, $499 or around 850 New Zealand dollar here. Is a price that is really affordable even for the average person who are not really that into photography. This TZ99 is not a camera that will wow anyone, but with the very affordable price, compact size, and the 30 times optical zoom, I believe this camera will sell very well. And I hope it will, because if it does, then it will bring confidence to Panasonic and other camera companies to spend more money to develop compact cameras again, and that will bring us some new compact cameras that are more than just a minor update. But if that happens, it will probably be quite a few years away.